Welcome back to Tales of Knights and Magic. Subscribe if you like, and now get comfortable, and enjoy this glimpse into the world of fantasy. Moonlight filtered through the skeletal arches of the ruins of Solara, bathing every fractured column and fallen glyph in a silver glow that felt both sacred and sorrowful. Jarek Vale crouched atop a broken wall, cloak drawn tight around his lean frame, eyes narrowed as he surveyed the courtyard below. At its center stood the Sunheart sundial, a massive disc of burnished gold veined with crystal, its surface carved with intricate sigils that pulsed faintly even in the dead of night. Lissa, pressed against his side, held the crystalline shard aloft, a fragment of the sundial's own light, stolen from a nearby reliquary. Its glow would guide them through the temple's wards, but it would also betray their presence if they faltered. 3 sentries by the eastern gate, Lissa whispered, voice barely more than a breath. Her dark eyes flicked to the patrol's shifting torches. The paladin has them on edge. He's expecting intruders. Jarek glanced across the courtyard, where Calum, the exiled paladin, stood in the moonlight. Once a paragon of Solara's honor, Calum now wore tarnished armor, etched with sunburst emblems half erased by shame. His broad shoulders tensed as he barked orders at a cohort of Moonblade mercenaries, hulking brutes whose jagged swords had tasted both coin and blood. Beside them, Tavin of the Moonblades paced with arms folded, his dark eyes calculating which side to back once the knight's prize was claimed. Marin the Glassbinder lingered in shadow at the sundial's base, studying its sigils with avid fascination. Her silvery glass lens goggles reflected every rune. Jarek's pulse throbbed. Between paladin and mercenary, a direct assault would be suicide. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling Lissa to follow. They slipped from the wall's crest and melted into shadow along the ruin's outer walkway. Below, a pair of silver-clad guards paused, hands resting on spear shafts, eyes scouring the darkness. Lissa raised the shard. A beam of cool light arced between them, striking the guards' gleaming armor. In their dazed confusion, Jarek drew a smoke powder flask from his belt. With a single twist, he cracked it against the stone floor. A plume of obsidian fog roiled outward, swallowing the guards in choking haze. Now, Jarek hissed, and they slipped past the drifting smoke toward the western niche, where the sundial's power lines converged in a ring of runestones. Marin's shadow flickered at the edge of that ring, already at work, bending shards of glass into delicate lenses that refracted the sundial's latent energy. Jarek's heart sank at the thought of her profiting off sacred magic, but he needed her artifice to disrupt the wards long enough to carry the artifact away. As they neared the niche, a sudden crack of thunder-sharp steel echoed behind them. One of the Moonblades had broken free from Calum's guard, his long blade arcing toward Marin's back. Lissa screamed and dove to shove the Glassbinder aside as Jarek vaulting forward, daggers flashing. The mercenary's blow missed Marin by inches, but caught Jarek's left arm, the steel's rasping scream against leather sending shockwaves of pain up his shoulder. He staggered, caught himself, and with a furious roar drove his dagger into the mercenary's ribs. The Moonblade collapsed, eyes wide with surprise, as Jarek wrenched free the dagger and spun toward the niche's runestones. Lissa rushed to Marin's side, supporting the trembling artisan. Jarek raised his blood-slicked fist to the circle of runes. The Sunheart's crystals overhead flickered in response, like a heartbeat quickened by fear. He traced a single sigil, Lissa's shard held aloft, its glow steady despite the wound's sting, and whispered the thief's invocation. Light of stolen day, grant us passage through lies and law. A low hum swept through the ruins as the runestones dimmed, and the sundial's golden disk descended on arcane rails into the niche. Marin grabbed its edge, her goggles fogging with fright. Hurry, she gasped, cradling the artifact in arms, more accustomed to crafting beautiful trinkets than bearing the weight of God-touched metal. Behind them, Calum's voice rang out on the wind. Stop, by the oath of Solara you shall restore that relic, or face the Sun Lord's judgment. His boots pounded on stone as he raced toward them, Moonblade reinforcements at his back. Above, the first pale tendrils of dawn brushed the horizon, threatening to awaken the sundial's full power in enemy hands, if Jarek did not move swiftly. Clutching the Sunheart sundial against his chest, Jarek turned to Lissa. Smash the shard, he ordered. Blow the ward and cover our escape. Lissa hesitated only a heartbeat before raising her hand, and hurling the crystalline fragment against the circle's edge. It shattered into a blinding spray of light and jagged motes that sizzled across the runestones. The runes trembled as the sundial groaned on its rails, then snapped free of its pedestal and slid backward into Jarek's arms. Just as Calum's gauntleted hand leapt, swiping at him, Jarek roared, vaulting over broken glyphs, and bolted toward the shattered wall where a hidden chute led down into Whisperwood's tangled root fields. Lissa and Marin followed at his heels, weaving between columns of smoke and sparks emitted by the avalanche of broken wards. Behind them, Calum cursed and lunged, silver sun burst blazing on his chest. They hurtled through narrow darkness as lyre-soft echoes of chanting began to rise above the thunder of their flight. Jarek braced himself against the surge of magic in the Sundale's center. Daylight distilled into a single sphere of living brilliance. If they could reach the forest's edge, he might sell the relic and vanish into freedom. But in the depths of Whisperwood's moon gleam, he knew that freedom came only at the price of darkness, and that once the Sundale's light was unleashed, no night would ever be the same again. With every pounding pulse of his blood, the chase pressed on through moon-drunk roots, past sleeping oaks, and into a destiny lit by stolen daylight. And still they ran, the Sunheart Sundale clutched between them, its power waiting to burst upon a world unprepared for its dawn. Branches whipped at Jarek's face as he burst from the buried chute into Whisperwood's moonlit heart. The Sunheart Sundale throbbed against his chest, its golden veins now pulsing with every stolen heartbeat, urging him onward even as his wounds throbbed in protest. Behind him, Lissa stumbled over a tangled root, but Marin caught her arm, steadying her before the girl pitched headlong into the underbrush. "Keep moving," Jarek gasped, limping around a massive oak, whose silver leaves seemed to lean toward them, as though drawn by the Sundale's radiance. Lissa wiped blood from her lip, clutching the shards of her broken crystal to her chest like a talisman. "They're right behind us," she panted. Somewhere beyond the trees, Calum's armor rang like a bell, each footfall a summons of righteous fury. They ducked beneath a low arch of twisted roots, and came upon Lissa's hidden path, a narrow gallery of phosphorescent mushrooms, whose faint glow traced a course deeper into the forest's shadow. Jarek recognized it. This was where she'd raised him, showing him secret hollows free from the forest's devouring magic. "This way," he whispered, pressing forward as the mushrooms gleamed brighter with each step. Marin stumbled again, her dress snagging on a thorn. Jarek reached back to free her, gritting his teeth against fresh pain. "I owe you," Marin said quietly. Without your dagger, she glanced at the fallen Moonblade mercenary beyond the chute. "I would have died." Under the fungi's gentle light, her reflection in his eyes was softer than he'd ever allowed himself to see. A flicker of doubt ghosted through his chest. Was this fortune worth the cost? Up ahead, the path branched into two corridors carved centuries ago by Whisperwood's roots. One arch plunged downward toward a subterranean stream, the other climbed steeply toward the forest rim. Jarek halted, Sunheart's glow illuminating his blood-smeared face. "The stream," he panted. "We can float the sundial downstream, then slip out at the old ford." A plan formed even as his pulse raced. "But Lissa," he glanced at the girl clutching her crystal, "can you guide us through those rapids?" Lissa's eyes shone with equal parts fear and determination. "I know them," she said firmly. "Trust me." With the paladin's bell-tone commands growing louder, they plunged down the slick rampart of roots into the cavernous bank of the hidden stream. The water lapped at Jarek's boots, cold and alive with whispering undertones. He pried loose an uprooted trunk, and with Marin's help, fashioned a crude raft buoyed by mushroom-hollow logs. The sundial, wrapped in Marin's glass-tinted cloth, settled into the raft's center, its golden surface gleaming like a newborn sun. "Paddle," Jarek ordered, handing Lissa a broken oar. Marin drove her boot against the opposite side. Jarek, who had finally caught up, dove in behind them, hefting a battered pole to push them from the bank. The current seized the raft and spun them downstream into a swirl of bioluminescent currents. Trees overhead dripped moonlight into the churning water, creating ribbons of silvery mist that danced across their faces. Lissa's paddle struck the surface repeatedly, steering them past hidden snags and through narrowing rapids that hummed with the sundial's unspent power. Behind them, Calum's silhouette appeared at the cavern mouth, a lone figure in tarnished armor, sword raised to cleave through vine and stone. He planted one boot at the lip of the cavern, glancing down the swift current. His voice, laced with sorrow, echoed, "Jarek Vale, return what you have taken. Trust in redemption." Jarek's heart seized. He clutched the sundial's rail, its warmth a reminder of every debt unpaid. "Not yet," he snarled, and urged Lissa to push harder into the tunnel's mouth, where the water narrowed, foaming over sharp stones. The raft slammed against the walls, and Marin cried out, arm flung across the sundial to shield it. Lissa's face flickered with fear, but she guided them true. They shot through the final curtain of rapids into the open river beyond Whisperwood. The roar of water receded as the current eased into a slow, broad channel. Jarek exhaled, the sundial's steady glow now a beacon in the dim dawn light. Lisa collapsed beside it, breathless but triumphant. Marin knelt to check her fractured arm, grimacing as Yara's hastily summoned wards closed the wound with violet sparks. Garrick climbed onto the bank and pulled them from the raft. Behind them, the cavern's mouth stood silent. Callum's armor no longer gleamed at its entrance. The paladin had chosen to remain at the forest's edge, honoring Jarrick's escape rather than pursue with vengeance. His solitary silhouette faded into the trees, the honor of Solara reclaimed in a single silent act. Jarrick straightened, the sun-heart sundial secured at his side. In that moment, the golden disk seemed to pulse in gratitude, its living power contained, for now within the arms of those who had risked everything for its light. The dawn's first rays glimmered off the river's surface, and the world held its breath, waiting to see what would be claimed next by the thief who had truly stolen daylight. The mist-hung morning in Calendra's lowlands greeted Jarrick Vale and his small band as they emerged from Whisperwood's hidden river mouth. The current slowed to a gentle flow through verdant marsh grasses that rippled gold in the rising sun. Jarrick tightened the straps on his pack, where the sun-heart sundial lay cushioned in Marin's glass-lined case, its veins of crystalline light still pulsing softly. Lysa hovered close, eyes wide with awe and exhaustion, while Garrick Truizin waded ashore, boots sinking into the reeds as he scouted the tree line for any sign of pursuers.
According to Taven's map, the rendezvous is just beyond that rise, Jarrick said, nodding toward a gently sloping embankment carpeted in dew-drenched wildflowers. He handed Marin's case to Lysa. Keep it hidden until we reach the clearing. No one must see it until the price is paid. Marin cast him a wary glance. And if our buyer double-crosses us? She asked, voice trembling with both fear and excitement. The sundial's power could turn a man mad, or grant him unstoppable authority. Jarrick shrugged, though his heart thrummed with the same unease. Then we'll rely on Garrick's fists and Lysa's wits. He clapped Garrick on the shoulder. Lead on, friend. They climbed the gentle rise and paused at the crest, to find a wide pasture dotted with ancient stones arranged in a ceremonial circle. A single oak stood at its center, its twisted trunk etched with weathered sun glyphs. There, leaning against the oak, waited Taven of the Moonblades, his dark cloak embroidered with mercenary badges and an expectant gleam in his eyes. Beside him, two hulking bodyguards leaned on spears stained with heat rust. Took you long enough, Taven greeted, voice low and playful. The vaults of Obsidian Spire never did hold a candle to the treasures of ruins of Solara. He tapped his boot impatiently. You have the sundial. Jarrick approached, feeling the sundial's hum through the case. Right here, he said, unsnapping the glass lid. As he lifted the sunheart into the open air, its golden surface caught the dawn's rays and flared in a blaze of living light. The bodyguards gasped, stepping back, hands trembling around their spear shafts. Taven's grin drifted into a frown. Beautiful, and worth every coin, he murmured. He produced a heavy iron chest from behind the oak, payment in hand, uncounted silver filling its belly. Half now, half upon safe delivery to Obsidian Spire. No funny business. Lysa stepped forward, holding the chest's lid as Jarrick unloaded a pouch and began hefting it inside. But before the final pouch could drop, a twisted laughter echoed through the pasture. From behind the stone circle strode Calum the exiled paladin, twin swords of glinting steel in hand, armor still bearing those battered sunburst emblems. At his side, Marin's glass goggles and Lysa's crystal shards glimmered ominously as both girls followed, each step deliberate. You would sell stolen daylight to the highest bidder. Calum's voice boomed with righteous fury. You betray Solara's legacy. His blade gleamed as he advanced toward Taven's bodyguards. Taven drew his own sword, its blade humming with mercenary runes. This is business, paladin, he retorted, stepping between Calum and Jarrick. I pay for power, nothing more. Power stolen from the world's balance, Calum countered, eyes fixed on Jarrick. They forget the cost of dawn. Jarrick set down the chest, heart pounding. Enough, he snarled, stepping between the two warriors. I will not see you spill this world's lifeblood for coin or for nobility's pride. He raised the sun heart high, its light pulsed in response, illuminating every face with a truth too radiant to ignore. In the sudden hush, Taven's bodyguards lowered their spears. Marin faltered, Lysa gasped, Calum's swords wavered as he too stared at the sundial's living light. Jarrick's voice softened. This artifact, this power belongs to no one. Not to me, nor to you, nor to any lord who would chain daylight for his own gain. He let the sun heart descend into Marin's trembling arms. I came to sell it, but I can't, won't while it burns in my hands. Taven's rage flickered and waned, replaced by grudging respect.
Calum sheathed his swords with a soft clang. Then what do you propose, Vale? The mercenary asked. Jarek exhaled, pulse steadying. We share it, he said, voice quiet but unwavering. We build a council. Solara's heirs, the Paladin's Order, the Artisans of Obsidian Spire, and the Guilds of Calendra, to safeguard this power, and use it to restore daylight where darkness has fallen, not to sell it for profit. Silence pressed between them, the bodyguard's breath mingling with the dawn breeze. Lissa pressed the glass-bound sundial to Jarek's chest, eyes shining. Daylight for all, she whispered. Slowly, Taven nodded, his hand drifting from his sword to clasp Jarek's shoulder. Then count me in, thief of sunrise. Let's make daylight everyone's share. Calum stepped forward and placed a gauntleted fist over Jarek's. For Solaris and for the dawn, he intoned. And as the oak of sun glyphs bore witness, the thief, the paladin, the mercenary, the artisan, and the orphan formed an unbreakable circle, pledging sun and shadow, gold and glass to a dawn that would never again be hoarded by greed. Their pact sealed in living light, the dawn's rays unfurled across the pasture, healing wounds and lifting hearts, as the Sun Heart's first true song of justice rang out over Calendra, and a new age of shared daylight began. Through the morning haze, word of the Sun Heart Council spread like fire across Calendra's villages and cities. Messengers galloped to Whisperwood's borders, bearing sealed letters to Solara's surviving temples. Traders rerouted caravans to Obsidian Spire, and even distant riverlords paused their disputes in deference to the dawn-forged alliance. Yet with every new petition for the Sundial's aid, Jarek Vale felt the weight of responsibility deepen. He strode beside Calem the Paladin through the council's oak-paneled chamber, Ira's staff resting against the map-tabled dais as Marin and Lissa unfurled itineraries of daylight relief expeditions. He must prioritize regions strangled by perpetual night, Ira declared, her voice both firm and gentle. The veil of gloom that fell last season atop the glass dune expanse has blighted every oasis. Without sunlight, the mirrored sands turn acidic, and no crop can survive. Calem nodded, steepling his gauntlets. Then dispatch a dawn convoy at once. Let the sundial's light be shared through prism crystals crafted by Marin. Jarek traced a finger along the expanse marked on the map, a sea of shifting silver dunes where nomad tribes once harvested sun mirrors for their caravans. Now those tribes huddled in subterranean caverns, their children pale-skinned and desperate. I'll lead the convoy, Jarek volunteered, meeting Marin's steady gaze. Your sugared glass panels will channel the sundial's rays across the dunes, sustaining their wells. Lissa rose, clutching her crystal shards. I'll guide them through the Whispering Fens bypass, avoid the Salter's curse, as I navigated Jarek here.
Her smile was fierce with purpose. Garrick Towson, summoned from Canal Construction, offered to serve as caravan guard. No bandit or beast will lay claw on our daylight, he vowed, hefting his hammer with a grin. Within the hour, the first dawn convoy assembled beneath the Hall of Storms, 10 caravans of glass carts gleaming in the morning light. Jarek climbed into the lead wagon, the Sunheart sundial mounted on a rotating prism stand, its golden face turned east. As the glass panels clicked into place, Marin ignited the first channel with a careful twist of her blowpipe, bending a sliver of light through the desert haze. They crossed the River of Silver by noon, then plunged into the glass dune expanse, as the sun hovered at its zenith. At once, the dunes gleamed like molten silver, and the midday glare threatened to blind the unprotected. Lissa led them along a ribbon of compacted sand, an old trade route hidden beneath drifting ridges. When the first nomad encampment came into view, its tents sagging under a twilight pall, Jarek felt hope rise in his chest. Calmly, he raised the sundial's prism to catch a shaft of sunlight, a rare wind gap opening through high cirrus clouds. Light refracted into a blazing beam that swept across the dunes, igniting Marin's glass panels into a cascade of gentle radiance. The tent's cloth stiffened as warmth returned, and the well's ancient pump began to churn, drawing fresh water up from below. Children emerged blinking into daylight. Elders wept at the first true day in months. But as cheers rang across the dunes, a deeper rumble shook the sands, a rolling wave of crushed glass that thundered like shifting seas. From the northern horizon emerged a band of rogue sorcerers, dispellers of light bent on stealing the sundial's secret for their own dark designs. They rode on crystalline beasts, their staffs crackling with anti-light wards. Jarek exchanged a grim nod with Calum, who leapt from the wagon in a flurry of sunburst steel. Garrick bellowed as he charged the first sorcerer, hammer fist meeting arcane shield with a shower of sparks. Lyssa sprinted to the sundial's stand, twisting the prism to cast a protective dome of pure daylight over the council's precious artifact. Marin dashed among the nomads, scattering shards of living glass that sprang to life as mirror ward projectiles, deflecting anti-light bolts back toward their casters. Era lifted her staff high and chanted the Chronicle's rain verse, "Tide of sky, wash away this blight, let sunlight pierce the heart of night." A sudden downpour of luminescent droplets washed over the battlefield, extinguishing the sorcerer's wards and bathing every soldier, nomad and guardian in hope's renewal. The crystalline beasts bucked and fled, and their riders, stripped of anti-light, surrendered in awe of the living dawn then coursed through their veins. When the last echo of battle faded, Jarek surveyed the dunes now alive with day. The nomad chieftain approached, carrying the sundial's case. "You have saved us from permanent darkness," he intoned, voice rough with gratitude. "Stormvale's light is our beacon. May it guide us always." As twilight gold washed the glass dunes farewell, Jarek returned to Stormvale's Hall of Storms under a convoy of grateful nomads and council envoys. He felt the Sunheart sundial's pulse steady at his side, a living testament to the fragile balance between light and dark, greed and generosity. But even as Stormvale's gates closed on the returning caravans, distant thunder drifted on the horizon, an omen that Kalendra's path of shared daylight was only just beginning, and that new storms of ambition, envy, and destiny lay waiting in the gathering clouds. And Jarek Vale, thief who stole daylight, braced himself to write the next chapter with courage anew. The halls of Stormvale still buzzed with the echo of the glass dune triumph, when 3 gilded carriages rolled through the western gate, heralded by trumpets carved in wind-glyph relief. Jarek Vale rode forward to greet them beneath a canopy of storm-lit banners. The first carriage bore Lord Emran of Obsidian Spire, his ebony cuirass inlaid with molten glass, flanked by 2 court magisters whose robes shimmered like rippling obsidian. Behind them came Master Glassbinder Rathis, Marin's former mentor, and a silent retinue of vault keepers whose eyes never left the Sunheart sundial's display case set at the square's center. Jarek extended his hand in welcome. "Lord Emran, your mirrors run brighter than rumor promised. Welcome to Stormvale." Lord Emran inclined his head, lips curved in a thin smile. "Jarek Vale, thief lord of Dawn, I congratulate you on your Dawn convoy's success. Yet before your people grow too comfortable in daylight, let us discuss the Spire's proposal." He motioned to Rathis, who unrolled a scroll bound by black ribbon. Marin stepped forward, heart pounding. Rathis's eyes flicked to her cracked goggles. "My apprentice has proven her craft," Marin said, voice steady, the prism panels held against the dunes. "Indeed," Rathis interrupted, fingers brushing the scroll's seal, "but Obsidian Spire's vault of light can house the sundial under eternal preservation, releasing its rays across Kalendra only by our calibrated prism network. We propose a rotating custody, 1 month in Stormvale, 1 month in the Spire, and full access to our archival chambers for your artisans." A murmur rippled through the assembled villagers and counselors. Jarek's jaw tightened. He glanced at Era, whose wards quivered with restrained power. Around him, Garrick Tozand and Maris the scout exchanged wary looks. "If we cede custody," Jarek said carefully, "Stormvale's fields will again be at mercy of distant hands. Our people, our children, depend on uninterrupted light." Lord Emran's smile widened. "So we suggest the creation of a twin vault. Stormvale's Hall of Storms remains the sundial's northern home. The Spire erects a southern counterpart, both linked by prism conduits and staffed by joint custodians. Should one vault fail, the other sustains the balance." Counselors leaned forward, Council Elder Oldwind's knobby fingers drumming the dais. "A twin vault ensures continuity," he said. "But who will oversee the custodians?" Rathis bowed. "A rotating commission, 2 Stormvale electors, 2 Spire magisters, and 1 neutral arbiter from Solara's reformed order, Kellum the Paladin, if he consents." Jarek studied the map-laid table. The twin vault plan promised both security and shared responsibility, but it also meant binding Stormvale to the Spire's political ties. He inhaled, turned to Marin and Lyssa, whose hopeful faces anchored him. "With these terms," he said at last, voice firm, "I will present them to Stormvale's council. But I ask one addition. Stormvale artisans must retain full creative license to craft our prism panels and teach the glass ward techniques to the Spire's guilds. We are no mere keepers. We are partners in light." Lord Emran nodded graciously. "Agreed, Thief Lord. Let partnership guide us, not hierarchy." Relief rippled through the crowd. Kellum the Paladin emerged at that moment from the Hall of Winds, gauntleted hand raised in silent assent. I serve as arbiter, he declared, voice echoing through the square. Let no vault eclipse the other in vigilance or honor. That evening, Stormvale hosted a grand banquet beneath a sky strung with lanterns carved in glass leaf. Tables laden with fire-roasted pheasant, fruit-glazed loaves, and quivering jellies winked in the sudden showers era, summoned to bless the crops. Across from Jarek sat Lord Emran and Rathis, their expressions courteous, but their eyes flickered with the scales of ambition. As Rathis rose to propose a toast, a sudden uproar cut through the revelry. Master Glassbinder Cathalor, summoned from the spire's vault to demonstrate the first joint prism rune, staggered forward, chest pressed against the rim of the Hall of Storm's display alcove. Her stolen prism, the only model capable of channeling true storm song, lay shattered at her feet, shards glittering like tears against the marble floor. A cold silence fell. Rathis's voice cracked. My prism, my life's work. He bent to scoop a fragment, but Lord Emran laid a restraining hand on his shoulder. Calm yourself, he said, quietly. Cathalor, who among us had motive? Shankai rose swiftly, wards flaring. This is no accident. Someone sought to cripple our shared light. She knelt to gather the fragments, violet sparks sealing the cuts under Rathis's shocked eyes. Jarek sprang to his feet, heart pounding. Search the courtyard. No one leaves until the culprit is found. He pointed to Lissa. Gather the scouts and Calum. Seal the exits. No one escorted by Spire's retinue may cross the gate unsearched. Under a sky muted by sudden clouds, soldiers and villagers collaborated in near-silent urgency. Valistaff guards inspected each guest's cloak. Scouts knelt at every table to sweep for glass dust trails. Era's wards traced rebellious runes. The lantern light flickered off every anxious face. Moments later, Lissa returned with Garrick at her side, breathless. We found tracks, 2 sets. One belongs to a Spire retainer, the other to a youth from Solara's order. Jarek's chest tightened. He strode toward Cathalor, who cradled the largest prism shard in trembling gloved fingers. Explain, Jarek demanded. Who else had access? Cathalor's sapphire eyes brimmed with shame. The apprentice magister, Talon. She pointed to a young man in midnight robes, edged in pale gold, his guise of innocence, shattered by speckles of broken glass on his sleeves. Nearby, a novice from the Solara order, Brother Cosrin, stood white-faced, his palms clenched at his sides. Calum the Paladin stepped forward, anger and betrayal warring in his gaze. Talon, he boomed. You swore to safeguard the storm song, not sabotage it. He drew his twin swords. Before Calum's blade could descend, Talon raised his hands, voice cracking. I meant only to delay the vault's activation. I feared what unrestrained light could unleash. Drought mancers, light shamans, all would seek to bend the Sundial's power for war. His confession wavered into a plea. I destroyed the prism to buy time, to renegotiate the pact before darkness became weapon. A hush fell. Era knelt before the shard, eyes wet. Fear is an echo of darkness, she said softly. But trust is the dawn we build. She clasped Talon's hand, warding his soul from the terror that drove his deed. Your crime was born of fear, not malice, yet fear must yield to faith. Jarek released a breath he'd not known he held. He turned to Lord Emrin. Will the Spire's Guild forgive one misguided heart if we reforged a new prism together? Lord Emrin studied the broken shard in Era's palm, then looked at Jarek, Calum and Marin. Stormvale showed mercy when the thief stole daylight. Now let Obsidian Spire return it, when the Maker feared its gift. He nodded once. We will rebuild, and under the Joint Commission's hand, no shard shall fracture again. Relief and resolve rippled through the Hall of Storms. Cathalor exhaled, and Marin joined her, arms entwined as they gathered the prism fragments for reforging. Calum sheathed his swords, a small smile breaking his austere mask. Talon wept quietly, and across the hall, Rathis embraced his former apprentice, vow-words lost in sobs of relief. As midnight drew near, they raised a final toast, no longer to solitary glory, but to shared dawns. The banquet tables had been reset with fresh bread and wine, and Era's wards shimmered like a soft aurora around them. Jarek touched the Sunheart sundial's case, feeling its steady pulse. In that beating heart of light, he sensed not only the promise of day, but the strength of mercy to heal broken bonds. Under storm beneath stars that glowed with honest light, Jarek Vale, thief steward, and now council's partner, watched as Calendra's first true alliance of dawn rose from shadow, forging hope anew in every shard of broken glass. At first light the next morning, the dawn convoy set out for Obsidian Spire, its dozen glass carts glinting like a procession of captured sunbeams. Jarek Vale rode at the head, Talon walking beside him, his gauntlets still stained with remorse, but his posture steadier now that forgiveness had mended more than shattered crystal. Behind them, Chalon the Paladin led a guard of Stormvale's militia in polished sunburst-etched cuirasses. Marin and Cathlor rode together, their saddlebags heavy with prism shard fragments and molten silica prepared for reforging. Lyssa trotted ahead on a wiry steed, scouting a route over the gently rolling foothills that would spare the delicate glass from jarring jolts. Garrick brought up the rear, warhammer proudly lashed to his saddle, ready to clear any roadblock, bandit or beast that threatened the peace. When the dark silhouette of Obsidian Spire rose above the horizon, its black glass towers refracting the morning's pale sun into slivers of color, the convoy paused at the foot of its crystallized ramparts. Lord Emran awaited them on the basalt steps, flanked by spire magisters whose robes shimmered with molten flecks. He inclined his head in greeting. "Welcome back, Vale," he called, "and welcome heralds of Stormvale's mercy. The Vault of Light stands ready for our joint stewardship." Inside the spire's great hall, the air was warm with forge heat, and flickering with torchlight reflected in polished obsidian inlays. Rathis and a cadre of master smiths had prepared the central forge, a basin of white-hot sand heated by subterranean currents, beneath which coils of wind crystal channeled whispered breezes to feed the molten flames. Marin and Cathalor, donning tempered goggles and ash-streaked leather aprons, approached the forge with reverent care, each bearing a cache of crushed prism shards bound in silk pouches. Rathis draped a length of wrought iron frame across the forge's rim. "Place your shards here," he intoned, voice echoing in the vaulted chamber. Together, Marin and Cathalor poured the fragments into the blazing sand. Flames leapt, steam hissed, and molten shards coalesced into a glowing rivulet of glass. Sparks danced as each artisan guided a swirl of light through their blowpipes, coaxing the liquid crystal into a single perfect prism, its facets aligned to the rune patterns charted on the council's scrolls. Outside, the assembled councilors, Stormvale's elders, Spire's magisters, and Solara's order, gazed through the hall's great window at Jarek as he stood before the newly forged prism. Ira rose to his side, her violet wards flickering in approval. Caleb unsheathed one of his sunburst swords and tapped the prism's edge in salute. "May this lens bridge our lands and guard our peace," he said. Garrick hefted his hammer with a grin. "Now let's see it work." He stepped back, nodding to Lyssa, who with a steady hand rotated the prism mount until a beam of morning light streamed through its facets and shattered into a brilliant cascade across the obsidian walls. Each colored ray bent and twisted through hidden conduits, crossing miles in an instant, a living thread of dawn between vault and vault. Far below in Stormvale's twin vault chamber, the corresponding prism flared to life, bathing the Hall of Storms in golden radiance. Villagers who had gathered for the demonstration gasped in delight as sunlight, harvested, tempered, and shared, flooded the room. Farther yet, a convoy of Spire envoys at the glass dune border paused in awe as the first true day in months blazed across the dunes, reviving parched oases with a single burst of pure sunlight. Back in the Spire's forge hall, Jarek let the hush of triumph settle before he spoke. "This light is ours together," he said, voice carrying upward through the vaulted ceiling. "No fortress can hold it, no greed can claim it, only our joined will can guide it to those in need." Rathis clapped Jarek on the shoulder, his stern countenance softening. "A finer use of glass and light than I ever forged," he said, pride ringing in his tone. Marin and Cathalor exchanged triumphant glances as they wiped sweat and soot from their cheeks. Their rivalry now melted into collaboration. When Lord Emran raised his goblet for the customary toast, the assembled throng echoed him in one voice. "To shared dawn and the covenant of light." Horns echoed as mead was drunk, the prism-forged rays dancing across every face in joyous celebration. Outside the spire's high windows, the twin beams continued to bridge sky and valley, an unbreakable cord of sunlight binding Stormvale, Obsidian Spire and every corner of Calendra in a promise that daylight would be neither stolen nor hoarded, but given freely to all who walked beneath its gift.
Weeks passed as the Twin Vault network proved its worth across Kalendra. Sunbeams channeled through Stormvale's Hall of Storms, and the Obsidian Spire's Vault of Light reached every parched dale and flooded fen alike, until one dawn brought word that tested the fragile harmony Jarek Vale had forged. A mounted courier from the Frost March thundered into Stormvale's courtyard, frost-crusted mail rattling with urgency. He dismounted before Jarek, gasping for breath. Lord Vale, the Frostmarch Guardians atop the northern ridge have sighted a legion of dusk bringers, cultists bent on shrouding our light forever. They march under banners of midnight and claim they will seize the Sunheart sundial and drag it into eternal night. A hush fell, Jarek's jaw set. He turned to Ira, whose violet wards flickered with alarm, and to Calum the Paladin, whose gauntleted fist clenched like detained thunder. Gather the council at once, Jarek ordered. Garrick Tealsen bellowed to drum a muster, and Marin and Cathalor began securing every prism facet with fresh wards. By midday, Stormvale's militia, bolstered by mercenaries from Obsidian Spire, rallied beneath the Hall of Storm's colonnade. Era unfurled a map of the northern marches, jagged peaks crowned with ancient fortresses, valleys choked with frost briar that blocked even the sun's fiercest rays. The Duskbringer's path cut through the gray hollows, where Frostmarch protectors held their vigil. Their numbers, the courier had said, were vast enough to overwhelm any single garrison. Jarek met the assembled captains under the prism's bright radiance. If they reach Frost Peak Pass, he said, voice clear as a mountain stream, they'll seize the Dual Vault's northern conduit and snuff out the flow of daylight to our people. We cannot let that happen. He paused, meeting Calum's stern gaze. Calum, lead our vanguard through the pass. Era, deploy your Sky Scribe wards to blind their scouts. Marin and Cathalor, reinforce the prism network along the ridge with mirror lenses that can blind any soul who dares approach. Flags snapped in sudden breeze as orders echoed through the ranks. By afternoon, Jarek rode out at Frost Peak's head with Calum's battle guard and Garrick's hammer squad. Lyssa scouted ahead, her keen eyes spotting ambush rails carved into ice-choked crevices. The Duskbringer's banners, midnight cloth sewn with silver crescents, swelled on the ridge above, their chanting drifting down like a gathering storm. As twilight bled into a purple dusk, the frozen pass shuddered with the clash of steel and darkness. Calum's sunburst cuirass gleamed in the torchlight as he cleaved through the cultists' ranks, his twin swords singing of dawn's vengeance. Garrick's thunderous hammer echoed against the bristling shields of Duskbringers, shattering their wards in sparks of broken shadow. Jarek weaved between knights and exorcists, brandishing a glaive etched with wind glyphs that summoned gusts to knock back the cult's forward vanguard. Above them, Era's Sky Scribe wards exploded like falling stars. She traced luminous cloud runes across the icy canopy, and sudden gusts channeled down the pass, scattering cult scouts like dry leaves. Marin and Cathalor dashed along the ridge's spine, tilting their mirror lenses to catch the last rays of sunset and hurl blinding beams into the enemy's eyes. Screams of fear rang louder than their defiant hymns. Still, the Duskbringers pressed on, their leader, a tall figure in obsidian robes, lifting a scepter crowned with a black crystal. He pointed it toward the northern conduit, where the top prism tower lay half buried in snow. A wave of consuming darkness rolled forth, clawing at the prism's facets, seeking to snuff its light. Jarek's heart thundered as he recognized that only the Sunheart sundial itself could repel such foul magic. With Calum and Garrick shielding him, Jarek sprinted toward the conduit's summit. Bullets of frost burst around him, but he vaulted over broken battlements and pressed on. Lyssa appeared at his side, breathless. The rampart is weak. Descend into the jagged stones, she cried, pointing to a hidden slide worn into the cliff's spine. They clambered down as the leader's darkness surged through the prism tower's broken runes. The tunnel's walls hummed as Jarek drew the sundial from its case, its golden face impervious to shadow's bite. Lyssa held her crystal shards steady as Jarek thrust the sundial into the conduit's core, its warm glow bursting forth in a corona of pure daylight. The darkness recoiled, shrieking like a wounded beast, and the Duskbringers staggered back, their scepter's power dissipating into nothingness. At once, dawn's light flooded the pass, pale gold brushing frozen outcrops, melting the edge of night's claim. The cultists collapsed, their dark robes turning to ash in the warming rays. Calum's voice rang across the ridge. Stand down, the light has judged your darkness. Jarek and Lyssa emerged from the jagged corridor as the Sunheart sundial's radiance streamed through the restored prism tower. Garrick and Marin joined them, breathless with triumph. Lyssa placed the sundial back in its case, her hands steady. There is no night too deep, she whispered, that daylight cannot conquer. Silence fell as Frostpeak Pass awoke to the first true dawn in months. Jarek looked across the freezing valley, heart full, his people safe once more, the twin vault network intact, and the Sun Heart's promise vindicated against the darkest of threats. As the last cultists fled into the mountains, the rising sun caught Jarek's gauntleted hand, glinting gold upon gold. He turned to his friends, Era's violet shimmer, Kellam's steadfast form, Marin's proud eyes, and Garrick's triumphant grin, and felt a deep peace settle in his chest. They had stolen daylight, shared it with the world, and defended it with their lives. Now, as the sun crowned Frostpeak's ridge, Jarek Vol, thief of sunrise, steward of dawn, led his company back down the pass, each step forging the unbreakable dawn that would guide Kelendra forever. Jarek Vol led the ragged company down Frostpeak Pass as the sun climbed steadily above the rim of gray ridges. Beneath their boots, snowmelt trickled in crystalline rivulets, and bright new grass pushed through the thawed rim of ice. Behind them, the restored prism tower shone like a beacon, casting its first golden radiance across the valley floor. Garrick Tuison strode beside Jarek, wiping sweat and soot from his brow. Never thought I'd see daylight banish night so thoroughly, he grumbled with a grin. Makes the hammer fist feel mightier than ever. He flexed his gauntlet, and Lysa laughed, brushing her palm across his armored shoulder. Calum the paladin rode at Jarek's flank, spear laid across his saddle. His armor gleamed under the morning light, sunburst emblems restored by Era's wards. Your leadership turned the tide, thief, he said quietly. I swore to guard the light, but you taught me its deeper meaning. He inclined his helm in silent respect. Ahead, Marin and Kalor led a squad of spire glass smiths, each bearing a newly forged prism lens. They paused at a scrub pine grove where frozen sap glistened, and Marin knelt to affix a rune ward-etched lens atop a slender pole. As she worked, she whispered the Chronicle's rain verse to banish residual frost, and tiny droplets dripped in iridescent arcs. Passers-by paused to watch her craft, no longer a competition between schools of glass, but a shared art that bound two realms in common purpose. At midday, the company reached the river ford where Jarek and Lysa had first emerged from Whisperwood. Here they paused to offer thanks. Lysa laid a wreath of moon leaves at the water's edge, and Jarek recited the thief's invocation with a nod to both sun and moon. By day reclaimed and night subdued, let balance hold, light to renew. The water shimmered in response, and a soft breeze carried petals downstream like drifting sparks of dawn. Garrick refilled waterskins as villagers, drawn by the twin vault's restored flow, emerged from concealed crossing places to greet the returning champions. Children ran barefoot to dip their hands in the warm current, shouting with delight as Tulandir, the local miller, ushered them back to the new floodgates safely. As dusk fell, the procession re-entered Stormvale's gates beneath fluttering banners, bearing the combined sunburst and anvil crest of the Sun Heart Council. Lanterns lit the walls in warm gold, and the townsfolk lined the cobbled streets in silent tribute. At the Hall of Storm's steps, Era awaited with a fresh scroll bound in crimson thread. News from Greywater that their canal engineers had completed the first phase of winter flood controls ahead of schedule. Jarek accepted the scroll with a nod, promising swift response. Inside the hall, a long oak table bore an array of gifts: barrels of ice-cleared grain from nomad tribes, crystal and etched chalices from Obsidian Spire's guild, and a simple clay figurine carved by Lysa, an intricate hand holding a sun on a leash. Each token spoke of enduring alliance and shared triumphs. As the counselors took their seats, Stormvale's elders, Spire magisters, Solara's paladin knights, Jarek rose to address them. Today we rode to reclaim our dawn, he said, voice echoing off vaulted beams. Tomorrow we must guard it with equal courage. Our foes may gather once more under moonless skies, but we have learned that light shared is light multiplied. Let this council stand vigilant, our prisms aligned, our wards unwavering, our hearts bound by the sunrise we fought to preserve. Applause rose, tempered with solemn resolve, and Calum signaled the closing of the Vault of Light's northern gate. Jarek and Era walked the length of the twin vault chamber afterward, checking ward glyphs that glowed a soft gold. The next trial will come, Era murmured, adjusting a wind glyph over the eastern hatch, but we are ready. Jarek placed a hand on the sundial's glass case. So long as the Sun Heart's light endures in both vaults, he replied, Stormvale's dawn will never fade. Outside, the lanterns dimmed as the first stars emerged,
faint, distant glimmers compared to the living radiance of the vault's prisms. In that gentle twilight, the people of Stormvale and the Spire's emissaries gathered by hearth fires and shared tales of desert oases saved, spectral armies vanquished, and bands of rogues turned guardians. Garrick led the laughter, Marin taught glass ward techniques to eager apprentices, and Lysa slipped through the crowd distributing hand-held sky shards that reflected every torchlight into tiny suns. And high above the Hall of Storms, the Sunheart sundials, its golden veins now mirrored by twin vault prisms, waited in silent vigil, its quiet pulse the heartbeat of a world newly convinced that the darkest threat could be met with the steadfast courage of those brave enough to forge the dawn. That evening, as lantern light danced on the Hall of Storm's polished floor, Jarek Vale found himself shoulder-deep in the Council's dispatches. Messengers from Greywater, the Glass Dune tribes, the Frost March, and even distant isles sent urgent requests. Permission to study the Prism Network, petitions for expanded water rights, pleas to guard against sun-obsessed zealots. Beside him, Era Windwick traced her quill along a map of Kalendra, labeling new wards, and noting where additional cloud-scribe glyphs were needed to steady the midday glare. From the council bench, Calum the Paladin bowed his head in solemn thought. We must avoid overextension, he warned softly, lest our light become a weapon rather than a gift. His words echoed in Jarek's mind as Garrick Tuazin stomped across the marble, returning from the Eastern Gate patrol. Bandits at the Frosthold Bridge, Garrick reported in a gravelly growl. 5 raiders, smoke-masked, riding frosthounds, seized a crate of prism shards meant for winter fortifications. He slammed a gauntleted fist on the table. They'll carve every shard into weaponry if we don't act. A hush fell. Marin the glassbinder rose, face pale beneath her soot-smudged goggles. Those shards were hardened with the Forge Heart ritual, she said. If they fall into the wrong hands, her voice trembled. Jarek cut across her fear. Then we ride tonight. He stood, shoulders squared in the lantern's glow. Calum, take the vanguard through Frostpeak Pass. Era and I will join with Lysa and Garrick at the bridge before dawn. Marin and Kalor will reforge replacements at the spire. No shard left unprotected. Calum bowed. At your command. Era offered Jarek a steadying smile, violet glyphs flickering in her eyes. We'll reclaim the light she promised. An hour later, beneath a waning moon, Jarek's escort, 15 of Stormvale's swiftest riders, clattered through the western gate. The air was crisp, silent but for the thunder of horses' hooves on the frost-tipped road. Garrick led the guards in first watch, blade drawn to parry any ambush. Behind him, Lysa's keen eyes scanned the forest edge for furtive movement, while Era murmured a wind chant to still the night's tremor and cloak their passage. They reached Frosthold Bridge as the first hush of dawn tinted the sky pink. The bridge's carved solar glyph posts stood broken, and splinters of prism glass glittered like fallen stars on the planks. A single bandit, masked in frost-white leathers, stood atop the railing, Frosthound at heel, raising a shadow scepter that crackled with anti-light wards. Jarek leapt from his saddle, sword raised. Release the shards, he commanded. Your darkness ends here.
The frost-masked raider laughed, the sound brittle as cracking ice. He slammed the scepter down. A wall of pale darkness roiled across the bridge's length, swallowing Jarek's steel and shadow. Lysa hissed as Garrick charged through the gloom, hammer fists swinging in arcs that shattered the anti-light bubble with shouts of defiance. Beyond them, Era's wards flared violet, pushing back the shadow veil in flickering waves. Jarek lunged for the bandit, blade slicing through frozen mist. The raider hurled a shard-tipped dagger, embedding it in the railing, but Jarek countered with a swift thrust that knocked the scepter from the man's grasp. Lysa's blade gleamed as she sprinted across the broken planks to seize the stolen crate, now splintered and empty. Behind the villain, 2 more frosthounds charged, jaws dripping ice, but Era raised her staff in a cloud scribe incantation. Winds that dance on Tempest's edge, scatter the pack their fury hedge. A sudden gust lifted the hounds off their paws, carrying them in a dizzying swirl until they tumbled into the frozen river below with yelps of surprise. Garrick roared as he pounded the last frosthound's snarling snout with his hammer, sending the creature squealing into the depths. Left alone, the frost-masked raider raised hands in surrender. Jarek's blade hovered at his throat. Who sent you? Jarek demanded. The raider spat frost voice ragged. The Dusk Council, they thirst for eternal night. They'll trade any betrayal for shards that kill light. Calum stepped forward, sword at rest. This ends now, he intoned, and led the captive away in chains. Lysa gathered the scattered prism glass shards, binding each fragment in cloth wards. Too small to reforge, she said sadly. We'll need new crystal from obsidian mines. Jarek nodded as dawn broke across the river's glassy surface. Then we press on to the spire, he said. Marin will reforge there while we fortify Frosthold Bridge and the twin vault conduits. By mid-morning, their battered troop retraced the pass to Stormvale, each rider carrying a shard pouch and stories of the Dusk Council's dark bargains. At the Hall of Storms, Marin and Cathalar stood ready with glowing crucibles. With every shard they melted down, Rassus guided their hands to inject fresh wind crystal and storm song into the melt, ensuring no frozen curse could ever bind the new prisms. As the last molten rivulet cooled into perfect prisms, Jarek and Era oversaw the prism replacement's installation on the bridge's guardrails and the prism tower's northern valves. Lissa sealed each with her crystal shards wards, and Garrick hammered protective runes into every beam, his laughter booming even as sweat dampened his brow. That night, Stormvale's lanterns burned brighter than ever around the Hall of Storms as the council reconvened. They toasted to reclaimed prisms, to thwarted darkness, and to the unbreakable dawn they had fought to preserve. Outside, a gentle breeze swept through the colonnade, carrying the faintest echo of a thief's invocation, and the promise that as long as they stood together, no night, no matter how deep, could ever steal the light from Kalendra's skies. Under the heavy glow of Stormvale's lunar lanterns, the Hall of Storms thrummed with cautious celebration. Counselors from Solara, Obsidian Spire, and Greywater reclined on carved benches, savoring spiced honey cake and the first vintage from the Glass Dune vineyards. Yet Jarek Vale paced the perimeter, eyes tracing the rune-lined walls for any flicker of unrest. Beside him, Era murmured the Chronicle's vigilance ward, each glyph glowing like a watchfire against unseen threats. A sudden clatter in the hall's antechamber cut through the murmured toasts. Calum the Paladin leapt to his feet as two palace guards staggered in, one clutching a blood-mottled banner of midnight silk. Lord Vale, the younger guard, gasped. Frostpeak's northern gate, breached. A squad of cloaked cultists carried the Dusk Council's black crystal through our wards. His armor jingled with frost dust. They've attacked the canal lock at Greywater's border. Waters cut off. Era's wards flared violet, then snapped to crackling alert. Without flow, she said, voice tight, the river temples will collapse in 3 hours. Greywater's mills depend on our light-fed floodgates, and their citizens are trapped between drought and famine. Jarek's chest tightened. Gather the Night Riders, he ordered. Lissa, form a scout ring. Garrick, arm the militia. We ride for Greywater now. He turned to Lord Emran, who sat stiff as obsidian. Your envoy must escort me, and your canal engineers must prepare for sabotage repair. Emran nodded, rising. We depart at once, he said, glancing toward the vault's twin prisms, their golden beams already dimming in warning. Within moments, 50 riders clattered beneath the hall's archway. Calum led on steed cloaked in sunlion barding. Marin and Cathalor dashed between horses bearing prism crates and repair tools, and Lissa held aloft her crystal shard to light their path through the sleeping woods. They arrived at the shattered lock as a pale dawn bled across Greywater's dying mills. Torrents of canal water gushed uncontrolled into the fields, flooding crops and drowning wheelworks, while beyond, the River of Silver's official patrol stood helpless before the Dusk Council's scepter-wielding warlock. His voice echoed, let your precious prism light guide only ruin. Garrick charged with hammer fist raised, scattering the warlock's wards in a spray of broken shadows. Lissa darted to the lock's control lever, twisting it closed even as the floodwaters roared. Marin and Cathalor sealed the breach with molten glass runes, streaming glowing resin into every crack until the lock groaned shut. But the Dusk Council's warlock had vanished, swallowed by a swirl of midnight silk that roared off downstream. Calum drew his sword. He retreats, he said grimly. But his hand is steady, and his wrath now floods our lands. Jarek surveyed the half-ruined canal walls, farmers wading through ankle-deep water to salvage seed sacks. He lifted his gauntlet and summoned the breeze glyph. Wind of promise, clear this spill, guide water's grace at human will. A gentle gale stirred the flood's edge, channeling the torrent back toward the river's main hold. Water receded with a soft sigh, leaving ruined fields but sparing the villages. Engineers and militia worked side by side to reset the sluice gates, while Calum marshaled them in defensive lines against any further dawn raids. Hours later, as the sun climbed, a council of crisis assembled on the dry canal bank. Lord Emran's face was drawn. The pillars of prism along the ridge showed scorch marks where the warlock had struck. This war won't end in a single dawn, Emran said quietly. They will plague our floodgates, our vaults, even our vault of light, until we break their will. Jarek met his gaze. Then we must hit them at their source. He unrolled a new map. This one of the Grey Hollows in the Dusk Council's fortress of Nightfall Keep.
Kalen and I will lead a strike force through the hollow's hidden trails. Era, you will fortify every prism tower with cloud scribe wards. Marin and Cathiller, prepare portable forges to reforge prism shards on the march. Lysa, scout ahead and guard our flanks. A tense hush followed, then Garrick hefted his hammer and laughed, voice echoing off the stone. Let them taste Dawn's hammer. As counselors rose to their feet, and war orders blazed across the map, Jarek felt the familiar rush of purpose. The Dusk Council had cast the first stone in this war of darkness versus light, but Stormveil and its allies would answer with a dawn that no shadow could swallow. Without pause for rest or regret, they turned back toward the river's bridge, already swarming with repairs, and from there through the soft ember grass and into the gray hollow's looming gloom. Their banners caught the rising sun's rays, each emblazoned with the twin crest of the Sunheart Council, sunburst and anvil intertwined in flawless unity. And so they rode, unwavering, toward the next breach in Kalendar's fragile dawn, undaunted, unbroken, and determined to forge a light that would banish night forever. The gray hollows rose before them like a canyon turned inside out, a labyrinth of cragged pillars, wind-worn arches and chasms so deep the sky vanished into their black mouths. Jarek Vale reined in at the lip of the first ravine, scanning the half-light through his gauntlet's sight runes. Beside him, Calum the Paladin's armor caught the dying sun, a beacon of resolve. Era stood ready with staff aloft, her wards humming in counter-rhythm to the canyon's shifting echoes. Marin and Cathor checked their portable forges, cocky tarps unfurled to shield fragile prism glass beneath. Lyssa crept ahead along a narrow ledge only she could slip, moon shards trailing in her wake like will-o'-the-wisps. 3 sentries at the northern arch, she whispered back, voice as soft as the breeze. Fully armored wielders of night-bane spears. Garrick Tussin cracked his knuckles. They won't know what struck them. He hefted his hammer ready to spring. Jarek nodded. We strike swift and silent. Drawing a deep breath, he led the descent into the canyon's maw. The first sentry noosed an arc of dark steel toward Lyssa's retreating form, but Calum intercepted, blade flashing in a white arc that severed the spear's haft. The sentry staggered back, and Garrick thundered forward, hammer colliding with helmet in a single bone-shattering blow. 2 more sentries spun to face the sudden onslaught. Era's storm, Chang crackled above their heads as she summoned a gust that tore their shields from unsteady grips. Marin whispered a glassword incantation, and ribbon shards leapt from her apron, swirling into the air to wedge between the soldiers' joints. With synchrony born of countless trials, Jarek and Calum closed the gap, one strike to a throat, the other to a fallen spear. Within heartbeats, the ledge lay empty save for the echo of clattering armor and the soft hiss of cooling crystal. They pressed deeper into the hollows, guided by Lyssa's shimmering shard. The canyon walls narrowed until the sky was nothing but a thin silver thread overhead. Here, the Dusk Council's wards thrummed in the stones, runes of fading light carved between shadow veins. Era paused before a jagged glyph, running her staff's tip along its edge. This ward dulls daylight, she muttered, voice tense. It must be shattered.
Jarek unsheathed his dagger, a relic from Solara's temple, whose blade glowed with stolen sunrise. He drove it into the ward's heart-like center. The rune flared scarlet, crumbling to dust as a shaft of full sunlight rained down through the slit in the canyon roof. The path ahead brightened, though the air grew chill with the knowledge that the Dusk Council had anticipated their advance. As the party advanced, the ground trembled, the first roar of the Dusk Council's war beasts. From a hidden crevice burst a half-dozen obelisk-scaled drakes, their eyes oozing black flame, jaws snapping puffs of shadow. Garrick raised his hammer and charged, each swing scattering scales like charred petals. Calum formed shield and sword to block the drake's blazing breath. Era sang the storm verse, wind whipping around the beast's leathery wings, slowing their charge. Marin hurled molten glass grenades at their ankles, sending them crashing into the canyon floor in showers of sparks. Lysa darted between claws, plunging her dagger into a drake's eye ridge to end its fury. Panting, the company gathered, drakes slain and their dark magic snuffed. Jarek clenched his jaw, the sundial's pulse steady at his hip. Nightfall Keep is near, he said, voice hushed. Climb the eastern fissure, that's where the council's main gate stands unguarded from below. They ascended a slippery crack in the rock, jostled by loose stones until a hidden ledge opened onto the buttress of a vast black fortress. Torchlight flared from arrow slits above, and portcullises sagged with war banners of midnight and iron. Beyond the gate, echoing corridors wound into the mountain's belly. Calum drew his breath in a steady thread.
We breach, we strike the scriptorium, destroy their war magic tomes, and then seize the Nightfell scepter. Its power bound to the black crystal is the heart of their darkness. Jarek nodded, eyes alight with grim purpose. At my signal, we split. Calum and I take the scriptorium, Garrick and Era secure the scepter's vault. Lysa and Marin disable the ward engine above. In 5 turns of the moon, we are out, or we die. With that, they slipped through the giant gate's shattered hinge, swallowed by torchlit shadows that whispered of betrayal and dread. In the deep hush before conflict, Jarek Vale's hand tightened on the dagger of dawn, ready to carve daylight into the heart of Midnight's keep, and forever banish the long starless night. Jarek slipped through the yawning arch of Nightfall Keep's shattered gate, Calum's armored shadow close at his heel. Behind them, Garrick and Era surged past flickering torchlight toward the vault corridor, while Lysa and Marin scaled the outer spiral ramp to the ward engine above. The stale air reeked of soot and iron, and every footstep echoed like a tolling bell of doom. Ahead, a polished obsidian door loomed etched with silver crescent moons, and chained by a lock wound in midnight silk. Calum produced a small sunburst key, plucked from a fallen cultist. "Stand ready," he whispered, turning the warded tumbler. The lock clicked, and the door swung inward into a chamber stacked floor to ceiling with leather-bound tomes. Inked scrolls lay open on lecterns, each inscribed with spells to unmake daylight. At the center stood a carved dais, atop which rested the Nightfell scepter, its black crystal pulsating with stolen dusk. Jarek's sword rang on the stone as he vaulted the threshold. "Calum, the scepter now," he roared. Calum lunged, driving his blade into the dais's carved moon glyph. Arcane chains sparked as the scepter teetered free, but the floor trembled, and a rumble of awoken wards burst from the walls, living shadows slithered off the shelves to swarm them. Outside, Garrick thundered through the vault corridor, Era at his side. The vault door's iron bars resisted their hammer and gale blast, but at last gave way as Garrick crashed it inward. Inside, he saw rows of prisms carved into the stone floor, twisted to capture the scepter's night moat. Era raised violet wards to seal the conduits, chanting, "Winds of dawn, break this spell, scatter night's unholy swell." A gust of pure light shattered the black crystals, spraying shards that fizzled into harmless motes. The vault's iron gates groaned open to reveal the scepter's alcove, now empty, but for the bitter scent of unspent darkness. Above, Lysa and Marin crept along the ramp's narrow planks, fingertips brushing carved runes that pulsed in warning. The ward engine sat at the summit, a great glass sphere cradled in iron coils, its coils humming with anti-light energies. Marin pressed molten prism glass against a crack in the sphere's base. Sparks flew as the glass fused the fracture, but the engine throbbed, resisting repair with pulsing shockwaves. Lysa raised her shard. "Shard of dawn, dispel this night. Let living light reclaim its right." The shard flared in her hand, and the sphere shattered in a cascade of glass, its anti-light core dissolving into 1,000 prisms of pure day. The coils clanged free, and the ramp's arches glowed as though dawn itself had burst within them. Back in the scriptorium, Jarek and Calum fought the shadow wraiths with sun-forged steel. Each slash dispersed a wraith in flickers of gold. Calum seized the Nightfell scepter and hurled it to Jarek, who caught it in both hands. The crystal's black sheen cracked under the sudden weight of dawn's magic, spilling a ripple of light that cleansed the chamber. With the scepter fallen, and every ward engine smashed, the cultist chants died on the wind. Through the gaping windows came the first true sunrise in ages, pale gold streaming across black stone. Jarek lifted the Nightfell scepter high, its crystal fissured clean as the stolen night bled away, leaving only the promise of mirrored dawn. Below, Garrick and Era joined them, Marin and Lysa clattering down the ramp with shards still warm. Jarek pressed the scepter into Calum's grasp. "Carry this to the Hall of Storms," he said, voice strained with triumph and relief. "Tonight we reclaim both light and dark, so neither may ever rise unchecked again." As they retraced their steps through Nightfall Keep's silent halls, the eastern sky flared in triumph. Stormvale's dawn returned, and with it, the certainty that no shadow, however deep, could stand against the united will of those who dared to steal the light back from eternal night. That evening, under a blood-red sunset that slowly softened into rose and gold, Jarek Vale and his companions stood atop the newly restored ramparts of Nightfall Keep. The twin prisms, one in Stormvale's Hall of Storms, the other in Obsidian Spire, blazed in unison far below, their beams dancing across the valley like threads of living dawn. Below them, the gates of the fortress had been sealed with sun-scarred iron, its once shadowed corridors now free of wards that sought to snuff out the light. Calum the paladin sheathed his swords and rested a gauntleted hand on Jarek's shoulder. Your courage reclaimed more than a keep, he said softly. You restored hope. Beside them, Era Windwick gathered the shattered remains of the Nightfall Scepter's black crystal in a velvet pouch, her violet ward sealing away every trace of its midnight curse. No shadow can stand in the face of shared light, she whispered. Merrin and Kalor knelt at the edge of the ramparts, fusing the last prism shard fragments into a single flawless lens, one destined for the Hall of Storm's new memorial gallery, where every citizen might see how even broken glass can be reforged into brilliance. Lysa, perched on a crinol, unwrapped the small clay figurine she'd gifted Jarek long ago, a hand cradling a tethered sun, and smiled as the wind lifted its tiny rays toward the sky. Garrick Toazand let out a hearty laugh that echoed through the silent stones. I never thought I'd ride into a keep under moonless skies, he said, lowering his hammer. But by dawn's light, I fought beside the finest company any thief could hope to call friends. Jarek looked out over the flickering lanterns of Nightfall's courtyard, where soldiers and artisans now labored side by side to clear rubble and repaint the sunburst anvil crest above the gate. His heart swelled as he realized how far they had come, from a desperate heist in Whisperwood to forging an alliance that spanned kingdoms. He drew a deep breath of the cool evening air, tasting both freedom and the promise of peace. As long as we stand together, he said, voice steady beneath the stars, no darkness, no matter how deep, will ever claim our world again. And with that vow, Jarek Vale, thief of dawn, steward of light, and guardian of day, climbed down from the battlements to join his friends, knowing that at the edge of night, they had won the true prize, a new world where every sunrise belonged to all.